Hey guys, it's Bree here at Blossom and Branch, and as promised, I am showing you guys how we make our wool pellet soil block recipe today. Let's go. You may have watched one of our hundreds of millions of other soil blocking videos in the past, but this one we're going to show you step by step how we use those wool pellets. You'll remember that when we did the test on all these various seed starting recipes a couple months ago, this one was the winner. So today I'm going to show you how to make it because there were a lot of questions on the wool pellets. Now, wool pellets are something that I started using last year in the garden. So first of all, we have sheep, so we have lots of wool available, and Wild Valley Farms offered to pelletize our wool for us. We were also told about its amazing slow release nitrogen and moisture retention capabilities, and we said that would be perfect for soil blocking. They're also just really good for garden use in general. They have no phosphorus, so if you tend to have high phosphorus levels in your soil like we do, then these are a great option because they are just slow release nitrogen, moisture retention, but no other stuff, no phosphorus. So we thought, how can we use these in seed starting? So last year, we used them in our soil blocks, but we mixed them in pellet form. Well, someone brilliant wrote to me on Instagram and said, have you tried putting them in the food processor? So we did, and it worked. But what I found is actually it works even better if they're a little bit wet. So in that last video, we were talking about making our soil blocking recipe, and we were using Coco Loco and the wool pellets. Now we are pulsing them up with a little bit of water, and you can see what happens when we do that is we get this really nice broken up texture. This incorporates so much better into our potting soils, especially for using this little guy. Pulsing them up with a little bit of water works really, really well. So let's do it. Now, you may be freaked out by the fact that I'm using my food processor. If you're worried about it, then you could always get a separate container for this process, but don't worry about it so much. It's just wool and a little manure. I have no problems with it, but I'm around poop all day. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna put these wool pellets into my food processor, and I don't wanna add too many at a time. If we add too much at one time, it overwhelms the food processor. All right, so I've got those in there. Now I'm gonna add that little bit of water. This just, I found, helps to mix them up a little bit better. Now, if we don't use the water, then they'll still pulse up a little bit, but they don't get nearly as broken down as when we add a little bit of water. You don't want to make them soaking, you just want to make them moist. So I'm not going to give you quantities. Start with just a little bit of water, and you can always add some. You don't want it to be wet like a slurry. Okay, well, of course, just as I went to show you that, we lost power here. We're in the middle of a huge blizzard, so you're gonna have to use your imagination. So I just pulsed it in the food processor. You probably know what that looks like. And once it comes out, we get something that looks like this. So now we're gonna mix up our soil blocking mix using our Coco Loco potting soil and our wool pellets. We talked about this in yesterday's video, but yes, people think that I have some inside cahoots with Fox Farms because that's the soil that I usually use for this. I don't. It's just the best peat-free potting soil option I have found. There's not many out there, at least here in the US. In the UK, where peat is banned in gardening use, there are more options. As I mentioned yesterday, if you don't have access to Fox Farms, this Coco Loco peat-free potting mix, seek out the next best option. So look for another peat-free potting soil. I would check and make sure it's OMRI Organic certified. And the only one that I would avoid is Beyond Peat. I've tried that one. It just didn't work that well for me, but let me know if it works for you. All right, so let's mix it up. All right, so let's go ahead and mix it up. I'm gonna do the same ratio. Now, if you watched our video from yesterday, you saw us sifting this potting soil. I do like to sift it before I use it in my blocks just because it helps get out any of the sticks or twigs or mulch or rocks or anything in the potting soil. So I use this 1/4 inch sifter to sift out my potting soil. So I have sifted potting soil. I use the Fox Farms by Coco Loco. That's what I have in here. That's it. And then I'm gonna add my wool pellets. I'm gonna do 3 parts of this soil. And a part is a part is a part. It doesn't matter what you're using. If you're using a bowl, if you're using a measuring cup, if you're using a mason jar, any of those things, it's just 3 of those, and then another half of your pulsed up, broken down wool pellets. All right, so 1 into my bin, 2, and 3. And now I'm measuring my wool pellets by volume. So I'm not doing it by weight. because I just know myself. I'm not gonna keep a scale with me when I am seed starting. So I'm just gonna do this by volume. So I'm just gonna measure into my bowl 1/2 of a part of my wool pellets. So the great thing about pulsing these up with a little water is it spreads them out a little bit more. They fluff up with a little water. So I've got about 1/2 of a part. I'm gonna add that in too, and now I'm gonna stir it all together. And then I'm gonna add my water. Yes, my water is dirty. It has some potting soil in it because I washed my soil blockers in there. So I'll do 1 part of water. We'll stir that up and see how that looks. If we need to add any more. This is still not wet enough. We want to be able to pull that soil aside, but still see a little bit of water in the bottom. So this is still gonna be a little too crumbly for soil blocks. But we also don't want it too wet. All right, so we're really gonna mix this well to try to get all that wool incorporated. People have asked me if you can do this with other fur or hair. I would say try it. I mean, I haven't tried it personally. I know that human hair does have nitrogen in it, so why not? So why do we use wool? We use the wool because it's that slow release nitrogen. It's got the moisture retention, and that slow release nitrogen is helpful with our seedlings. So we actually don't have to fertilize when we're doing this. So yes, you might spend a little bit more on the wool pellets, but you're saving time. All right, so now we're finally looking about wet enough. Now the longer this sits, it will dry out a little bit. So if you do this the night before, it'll be a little bit drier when you come back to it. So there we go. This is about what we're looking for. So you can see there's some moisture. If I pull back my spatula, a little moisture comes out, but it's not sitting in a pool of moisture. Now, as we press out our blocks, this is gonna get a little bit wetter. So always reserve a little bit of your dry mix so that you can add it into your wet if it gets too wet. All right, let's test it. I always say the best tester is a mini blocker. The small ones, because they're the hardest ones. So if we can make this work with a mini, then we can make it work with any size. Press and wiggle. Give it a scrape. And one more time. Give it a scrape. Perfect. Gorgeous blocks. And the wool is much more evenly incorporated this way. So very happy with this mix. This works quite well. Super easy. And again, it's just Fox Farms Coco Loco potting soil. It's got this crazy looking guy on the front. And our wool pellets here. Remember, if you don't want to use the wool pellets because they are a little bit expensive, and if you feel like that's cost prohibitive, go back and watch our video from yesterday where we made it without that, and instead we swapped in mycorrhiza. I found that works almost just as well. So if you need to go with that option, that works too. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in again to talk more soil blocking here at the farm. I smell like a wet sweater. Oh, that's the last thing we should know, is that there is a scent to the wool pellets. It smells a little bit like a wet, dirty sweater, but the scent does fade in a couple days, so don't worry too much about it if that's off-putting at first. It does go away over time. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe. It means a lot to us here, and I appreciate you guys all being here and tuning in. See you guys next time.